I don't think that my students are actually human. It's crazy what the human mind can adapt to if it's determined enough. I'm not some moron from a horror movie who goes poking his nose into every dark crawl space when he hears a noise. When weird things happen here at school, I don't even offer them a second glance. I'm like a horse with blinders on, always looking ahead, never getting distracted. Something terrible may be going on here behind the scenes, but I figured that if I just minded my own business and focused on my work, it would never touch me. And that tactic actually worked. Until last night. The moment I got to collapse on the couch at the end of every day was the only thing keeping me going. Once I was home, after all, I was certain I was safe from whatever was going on at work. I'd officially made it through another day. I'd been recuperating from my shift in standard fashion, wasting my life on the couch, watching TV and drowning my woes in cheap beer, listening to the rain pounding on my roof when something suddenly slapped me awake from my drunken stupor, the mention of the name William. I popped up in an instant, staring at the news report as if spellbound. They'd found his hand, and just as Katie had hoped, it was lacking all of its fingernails. Crews were being assembled to scout the woods for the rest of his body, and I prayed their search would lead them to the school. No dice. The hand had been found on a cliffside dozens of miles away. No foul play was suspected, only the ravages of nature. I watched as a forensic scientist speculated that a bear or coyotes either killed him or consumed his body after death by some other cause, judging by the hints of tooth marks along their cut to static. I groaned, missing the days of CRT television, when all you had to do was give it a good smack on the side. I was just about to give up and go grab another beer when my phone started vibrating in my pocket like mad. One of those doorbell cameras had come with the house here, and it just buzzed me with 6 notifications back to back. Each read the same: MOTIONDEATECTE, the TFRONTDOOR. I opened the attached photo and found myself dumbfounded. Again, static. It looked exactly like the black and white dominating my TV screen. I didn't even know those cameras could malfunction in that way. I tried to push the growing unease aside as I flicked through the photos, each as distorted as the last. Was a salesman at the door or something? If so, why couldn't I hear any knocking? And then I reached the 6th picture and gasped with such shock that I dropped my phone. It was an eye. A single eye, red and veiny and bloodshot, piercing through the static, with pupils so dilated that the iris looked almost completely black. It was as if somebody was pressing their face directly against my door camera, just to stare back at me through my own screen, like they were peeking through a keyhole. I stared at my phone on the ground, my heart seizing in my chest. I knew it was just a still photo, but I couldn't help but feel I was locking eyes with something staring back at me. And then I heard crackling in my TV set and looked up to see it yet again, that very same eye, staring at me from behind that blurring fuzz of static, gazing rapidly around the room before settling to meet my gaze. Its pupils dilated even further, as if excited by the sight of me. And then came a crash and roar that shook my home, and I screamed and fell to the floor, sure some demon was charging towards me. But it was only a bolt of lightning crashing down right outside my door, and my TV screen burned out, every light in my home flickering and dying, a terrible silence and darkness settling upon my living room. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone to flick on its measly little flashlight. I know I was probably just giving away my position, but I just couldn't bear to sit there in that pitch blackness, knowing something could come at me from any angle in the dark. The faint outline of that black eye seemed to have burned itself into my phone screen, but I tried to ignore it. What was I supposed to do? My every primitive instinct was screaming at me to run, like I was some deer in the woods who could sense that the wolves were circling. But how could I escape something I didn't even understand? I hid in my bedroom with all the superstition of a child who believes hiding under a blanket would protect them from the monster in their closet, staring at my door and clutching my baseball bat like it would do anything. The static returned, outside this time. At first, I thought it was just the rain beating against my 2 windows. But then I turned and saw a hint of white light pouring through the glass. I hid just in time. Something unfathomable walked slowly past my bedroom windows, which was doubly concerning given the fact I was on the 2nd floor. It had the shape of a man, I thought, at least the roughest silhouette. But it was composed entirely of static, like a TV screen tuned to a dead channel, screeching that static screech and bathing my room in that flickering white light. Even when it passed, I stayed hidden, too scared to move, to breathe, to even think.
Tears were streaming down my face.
I couldn't stop shaking all over. And then I screamed and jumped to my feet when my bedroom computer screen suddenly blared to life, roaring with the crackle of static that felt like an ice pick working its way into my brain. And from that static, something began to emerge, almost like it was oozing from the computer screen before morphing into a solid shape. I dropped to my knees and covered my ears, screaming and pounding my head. Nothing worked. The static just kept getting louder and louder. There it was, floating above me. Something that mockingly disobeyed every rule of God and nature with its very existence. And through the flickering static it was composed of, I caught glimpses of eyes, thousands of them, all bloodshot and black, staring daggers into my soul. It floated ever closer, its flickering hands reaching out as if ready to settle around my neck. I remembered the way William wailed in the woods. I wondered if I'd sound similar. But when its grasp was only an inch away, it froze in its tracks. And I heard a floorboard creak from my bedroom door, which now stood ajar. It was the Hastings twins. They settled their emotionless gaze upon the impossible creature and opened their mouths to speak for the first time. But not in words. Instead, that same horrible static came rumbling up their throats in unison, and the creature crackled back at them as if they were having a conversation. No, an argument. And once it was settled, the thing hovering above me seemed to begrudgingly flicker out, like a TV set being switched off. And the Hastings, too, nodded before disappearing back into the blackness of the hallway, the sound of their footsteps stopping abruptly, as if they vanished into the dark itself. The lights flicked back on. Everything went back to normal in an instant. And once again, I'd been left alone to agonize after having witnessed the impossible. I don't want to go into the self-destructive spiral that was the rest of that night. Crying and dancing and drinking and stumbling around the house like I was commemorating my brush with death. I didn't know what to feel. Relieved or horrified or upset. I was crying one moment and laughing the next. But eventually, I finally settled on a single emotion, anger. My knuckles had almost turned white from how hard I'd been gripping the steering wheel as I tore through that dark and stormy night. I slammed my brakes in front of the school and looked up at it with a swirling, drunken hatred. And there, a faint light from the headmistress' office, just like there always was, even long after everyone else had gone home for the night. It was like she never slept. The headmistress was a woman of sunken cheeks and sharp, angular features, harsh yet faultless, like she had not been born, but was rather a sculpture chipped out of marble by some Renaissance master. She sat at her dreary, candlelit desk in anticipation when I stormed in, as if she'd been expecting me. "Mr. Vermeil," she greeted. "How may I help you?" But I'd already seen that familiar, knowing look in her eyes. I scowled at her. "You know why I'm here. Perhaps I want to hear it in your own words." "Don't do that," I snapped at her. It drove me mad, that tone of hers. "You always speak to me like I'm some stupid child. I am not. You aren't pulling the wool over my eyes anymore." Her brows raised, almost imperceptibly. Did she not even realize she'd been doing that? Or was she just surprised I'd called her out? "My apologies." She composed herself. "Please, state your piece." I sat down across from her, collecting my thoughts. "Now, I have put up with a hell of a lot for this job. Not for you, and not for the money. For the kids. But there's something wrong going on here, and I am not going to let you tell me everything's fine and dandy. Not this time." I jabbed a finger at her. "Every man has his limit. And having some godforsaken thing busting into my home in the middle of the night? I am already aware of this intrusion, Mr. Vermeil, and you have my sincerest apologies. It is unprecedented in the history of this initiative," she said in that same even-handed tone. "A parent was upset with the Hunter incident from the other week and somehow deemed you worthy of the blame. The Hastings family is brand new to us, you see, and doesn't quite understand how things work here. I shall see to it that their behavior is corrected." I slammed a fist against the desk. "A parent? You act like this was some botched PT meeting. A thing that busted into my house wasn't even human." I leaned in close. "Headmistress, I'm telling you for the last time. I'm not some useful idiot you can keep in the dark forever. You need to tell me what's going on here, or I walk. Simple as that." There was a long pause, and in that silence, my mind ran wild. My nerve faltered. Maybe I really am one of those morons from a horror movie, I realized. I just waltzed into the headmistress' office all alone and ranted about knowing far too much. If there was some sort of conspiracy going on here, what was stopping her from disappearing me at that very moment? I braced myself for those things in the security uniforms to kick down my door, but instead, the headmistress slowly stood and turned to face the window with her arms crossed behind her back, watching the raindrops roll down her window. "Do you know the one thing that unites all sentient things, Mr. Vermeil?" I blinked. No, I don't. "The capacity for parental love," she explained. "Even penguins will guard and warm their eggs for weeks. Elephants will nurture and rear their calves for over a decade, etc., etc. The love a parent may have for their child is one of the very few ineffable qualities which unites all intelligent species." I know what you're about to say. Yes, there are true monsters out there, of every kind, who neglect or abuse their children. But that is their choice, their own sin. It is not innate to them. In the end, even the darkest devils or most wicked fiends are capable of making the choice to love their own children. She turned to me, and her gaze was hard and cold. I'd never seen her so on edge. "Now, I want to imagine that you are of a species that is reviled by all the world, despised and feared by all mankind, considered the stuff of nightmares and urban legend. Perhaps your reputation is well earned. Perhaps you've come to accept your life as a thing of horror, lonely, dreaded but free. Her heels clicked against the wood floor as she stepped closer. But would you not want better for your children? Would you not want them to have, at least, the option of living in a world that accepts them? There was a tinge of emotion in her voice, the first I'd ever heard. That is the Integration Initiative, she concluded, gesturing to the photos littering the walls of smiling alumni. We offered you all a truce in a war older than the very mountain we're standing on. I stared at her, breathless, slowly working up the courage to ask. We? As if on cue, lightning struck seemingly just outside her window and lit up the room in its ghostly blue glow. And in that light, the headmistress' shadow appeared to encompass her entire half of the room. It had the shape of something not only inhuman, but which defied all natural laws, some impossible cyclopean beast adorned by 1,000 writhing, grasping tentacles, the sort of creature I could imagine pulling entire ships down beneath the sea in some bygone era. But the lightning passed, and all that left was the woman standing before me, staring me dead in the eyes. Do you understand? What else could I do but nod? To be continued.